It is true. I mean, when I was coming from a Calvinist background, I know when I used to explain, why, Arminianism was wrong, oftentimes the phrase, but God couldn't fail comes up, right? Because if God desired someone's salvation and they weren't saved, it meant God failed in his intention, but God is perfect and God is all-powerful, so God cannot fail. Logically it does make sense. And logically it might make more sense than to say the opposite. But the question is exactly as you said, not what makes sense, but what's been revealed. And, can God work irresistibly? Absolutely. God can do whatever he wants. But the question is, what has he revealed? And what he's revealed is he does work. There is divine monergism. Those who are saved, are saved not because of their will in any sense whatsoever, but solely because of God's grace. But there is this other reality that if we're not saved, it's our human resistance. But Scripture is also clear God desires them to be saved. And we're left with this mystery of how do those two things work together. And, we ultimately have to say, I don't know. That's what God has chosen to do. God has chosen to let his grace be resistible in that way, even though he wills their salvation. And, who are we to question that Calvinists always ask, right? Who are we to question God? Like Paul says in Romans 9. But that's a real thing that we have to wrestle with, is what God has revealed is what God has revealed. And I think this is the thing about Calvinism, what's appealing about it is that it is a very logically consistent system, right? It's very logically consistent with itself. It answers a lot of questions. And, I like questions and I like answers to questions even more, right? So it's appealing in that way. Like, I like to have answers. And Calvinism does give those answers. And all of the 5 points flow very well together. And you've got this idea of a covenant of redemption and eternity past that even starts the whole system, and it's all so logical all the way through, but it's not scriptural. And I think, and Calvinists, of course, are going to deny this, but I think what happens is that to some extent logic does take precedence over Scripture, in that the way that Scripture is being interpreted is people saying, but this is the only way it makes sense. A great example of that, is, and we haven't touched on the sacraments, but just to kind of bring it in a little bit, baptism, to say that baptism does anything that is saving or in any way brings the infant into God's grace, if that's the case, often the Calvinists argue, then, well, that means that they can fall away, because not all infants that are baptized are Christians throughout their lives. And it messes with the P of tulip, right? So oftentimes when I have this conversation, I say, but what do the texts about baptism say? Here are the clear words, here's the context. I often just encounter the argument, but that doesn't make sense with this thing that I believe. And it's that but that doesn't make sense. That really, I think, is the hindrance for a lot of people. And sometimes people, kind of mock Lutherans, like, you guys don't make any sense. They're just all about mystery and all this weird stuff. But we should be about mystery. And I think we should rejoice in mystery. I say, and I say this to the students that I teach all the time, is if we understood God, if we completely understood God, then that would mean that he's probably a God we've made up. Right?
Exactly.
Like, we should expect that God, if he really is, transcendent, if he really is this completely other, being, the triune God is so other than his creation, like, we should be left in places that don't make sense to our finite minds.